Yeah, N'Zoth is now referred to as one of the 5 old gods who ruled over the Black Empire. Apparently early in the book that says there are 4 old gods, not 5. It's weird. Yeah, it seems a bit, I don't want to use the word janky, from what I've heard about it. But then I never know, because when people talk about WoW books online, they're always like so incredibly fucking harsh. So I don't know. I will have to kind of reserve judgment until I see it myself. Okay, so let's have a look at this. N'Zoth is now referred to as one of the 5 old gods who ruled over the Black Empire, but it's still remarked that the Titans found and imprisoned 4 when they discovered Azeroth. That's not an inconsistency. Reddit, you're fucking idiots. Sorry, I know the internet hates it when I call people fucking idiots, but I literally just reading this, that's not an inconsistency. Do you want me to tell you why it's not an inconsistency? Because this is the 5th old god who was eaten by the other 4 old gods before the Titans arrived. No, they meant as in they switched between 4 and 5. Yeah, but that's what this says. N'Zoth is now referred to as one of the 5 old gods who ruled over the Black Empire, but it is still remarked, i.e. earlier, that the Titans found and imprisoned 4 when they first discovered Azeroth. But that just means that the 5th one was gone by the time the Titans arrived. That's all it means. That's not an inconsistency. People, as usual, are so keen to find fault that they're not being curious. People, as usual, are doing their little cinema sins thing and going, ding, 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 cinema sin, cinema sin, cinema sin. And they're not actually paying attention to the thing that happened. There were 5 old gods that at one time ruled over the Black Empire. By the time the Titans arrived, there were 4. So instead of going, inconsistency, you go, well, what happened to the other one? Gone into the Black Blade, maybe? Well, it's funny you should mention that. Let me... Let's go back into the actual real game for a second. Do we think the 5th or its remnants might be on the back half of Azeroth with the Arathi? That's my bet. Maybe, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Mego, you're absolutely right. It doesn't actually even mean that the 5th old god was gone by the time the Titans arrived. It just means the Titans only found 4 of them. You're absolutely right. Reddit is in a fucking shambles. This is ridiculous. Like, this is actually, like, legitimately bad play from Reddit. Right, okay. As you can see, last stream, I got my Tavan. Thank you. We don't have any idea what happened to the 5th, but we might have an idea. We might have a clue, I should say. It's more fun to speculate rather than scream into the void that something is a retcon and bad. Well, not just that. Sometimes it is quite fun to scream into the void, don't get me wrong. But also, like, if you scream into the void automatically, as a matter of course, quite a lot of time you're going to be very wrong about stuff. It is an inconsistency which should make us wonder why. Exactly. It's not necessarily a mistake. So here we are in the Priest Order Hall. And Word of the Conclave, Light's Wrath, whatever, Tura, yeah, whatever. Here we go. Xal'atath, Blade of the Black Empire. Xal'atath had its dark genesis in an age long before the Horde and the Alliance, an age where the legendary old gods and their Black Empire engulfed the world in shadow. There are many theories concerning the Blade's creation. The more outlandish claim is it is all that remains of a forgotten old god who was consumed by its kin in the early days of the Black Empire. That's one theory as to what Xal'atath is. Another theory state that Xal'atath is the claw of Yasharaj. But let's focus on that first one. The more outlandish claim that it is all that remains of a forgotten old god. So, if there is a forgotten old god who was consumed by the other old gods, there's your missing old god, right? There's your inconsistency. There's your mistake. Just saying, Reddit, maybe you need to chill the fuck out and actually read. Maybe you need to pay a bit of fucking attention, Reddit. Just saying. So, you know, I think most people, been on the 5th OG theory since Legion, to be honest. Yeah. And the thing is, the new books in Alderman, and the Dragonflight version of Alderman, basically also confirm a fifth old god as well. So, you know, having it in Chronicle isn't new. It's really interesting that it's in Chronicle, but yeah. So there are many things this could mean for the character of Xal'atath, because someone was asking my chat just now if Xal'atath has been confirmed as an old god. No, I actually think she's not, but it's possible she was. It's possible that she was this fifth old god, and she was consumed by the other old gods, and then her essence was like stored in the dagger, and the dagger was the last remaining part of her. That's possible. It's also possible, and this is the theory that I like best. It's not necessarily the one that I think is the most likely, but it's the one that I like the best, is that Xal'atath is actually from Azeroth, and that Xal'atath is actually a native of Azeroth, and that she is like a mortal who was born on Azeroth as like one of their slave races, because we know that the Black Empire did have native mortals around the place who they treated as like animals and cattle and made sacrifices and stuff like that with them. And I love the idea that Xal'atath was just like unusually clever and unusually advanced, and, you know, somehow by being all awesome and evil managed to actually rise through the ranks of the Black Empire despite the fact that she was a mortal and became like a high priestess maybe of this fifth old god. So when the other old gods devoured this fifth one, this missing one, you know how like sometimes in ancient Egypt they would like when an Egyptian king died and they put them in the pyramid, they'd put all like their wives and concubines and servants and stuff in the tomb with them, even though they were all still alive, and they'd like seal them all in the tomb. I don't know if that actually happened, but like that's that's something that I understand from watching like kids TV shows and stuff. What if when they killed the old god, they thought it would be fitting and funny to, like, instead of killing his number one servant, trap her within the dagger? Like, hey, you love this old god so much, haha, fuck you, and put her in there. She does say in BFA, when we release her from the dagger and she goes into the body of Inanis and she starts using the body of Inanis, she says, "It has been so long since I took a mortal form." Now, I don't know if that means that she used to be mortal. It certainly raises it as a possibility. It could also mean that she just, you know, enjoyed at some point taking mortal forms before she got trapped in the dagger. But it does not rule out the fact that she might have been mortal at some point. So I don't necessarily think this is the most likely scenario, but it's definitely my personal favorite scenario, is that Xal'atath maybe was actually a native of Azeroth and was actually a mortal and one of like the earliest kind of fleshy mortals on Azeroth, and, you know, kind of rose through the ranks by being very evil, and kind of rose to being like the right hand of this fifth old god, who, when they were consumed, I think it's likely that that's not the case, because Locust Walker knows who she is. In the Dark Heart quests, Locust Walker clearly knows who Xal'atath is, and it feels likely, therefore, that Xal'atath is, as we've always suspected, a void being. You know, a being from the void, actually like from the void cosmos. And is, you know, something akin to a Void Lord, something like that. You know, that would fit my original theories regarding her, and I think it's still the most likely scenario. Her connection to Demensis is disappointing, in my opinion. It just makes her a lieutenant for a bigger bad. Or a harbinger, yeah. Swedent, thank you very much for the sub. And that's why I really like the idea that she's from Azeroth, because that gives her like a unique connection to Azeroth, and it gives her a unique interest in Azeroth. And I just really like it as an idea. I really like that she was a high up servant for this fifth old god. But anyway, back to what we were talking about in terms of Chronicle. Very interesting that Chronicle does seem to canonize the idea of a fifth old god. And no, Reddit, that's not an inconsistency. I mean, it is, but it's like a purposeful inconsistency, right? You know, the Titans did not find this fifth old god. And that can mean that we're talking about the old god that got consumed by the other old gods, and that happened before the Titans arrived. But it might not be that. It could be that they just didn't find the other old god. Maybe there was a fifth old god who just hid. And maybe that other old god is on the other side of the planet. It would be cool to have an old god to fight when we do eventually go around to the other side of the planet. That would be really, really cool. But either way, yeah, it's another classic case. It would seem, did the Titans go to the backside of Azeroth? I mean, they might have scooted around it, but didn't find any old gods there. So we're like, okay, clearly our priority is this side of the world. Maybe the other old god was already hiding. Doesn't this mean that Chronicle isn't from the perspective of the Titans? Well, lots of it can be from the perspective of the Titans. But if you're taking it as entirely from the perspective of the Titans, and perspective is a strange word that can mean different things from different, you know, just because it's the perspective of the Titans has never meant that it was written by the Titans. That's never meant that, you know? It's like saying that we see the Bible from the perspective of many different things. We see the Bible, the New Testament, from the perspective of the disciples who wrote it. And, you know, they contradict each other within the Bible at times. We see the Bible from the perspective of the many, many hands that those books have passed through and been edited by, and some of it thrown out by. You know, Constantine, a very famous example, but he wasn't the only one. We see the New Testament from the perspective of whichever translation we happen to be reading. You know, there are so many different perspectives and prisms that we see the New Testament from. And I think that's the same when it comes to Chronicle, right? The idea that it's from the perspective of the Titans isn't like the Titans wrote Chronicle. It's like everything we know or think we know, and the perspective that we see the universe from is, you know, from our history and things that we've found and things that we've heard and things that we've been told. And who tells us? What is the history that's there? It's all Titan facilities. Like, it's all Titan constructs. It's all Titan watchers who tell us shit. It's all books written by, you know, like the only contemporary accounts we have on Azeroth are from a Titan perspective. Not literally from the Titans, but from people who saw the Titans as good guys and so wrote them as good guys. From Titan watchers who are like the kin of Titans, you know? From the records that the Titans left, you know? That's what it means when it means it's from the perspective of the Titans, not literally the Titans sat down and wrote it. And as such, Chronicle can contradict itself. I don't think it does here. And I want to be very clear. The person that brought this up originally that I'm commenting on, this is not me talking for 10 minutes to blow you out of the water, right? Because you're actually right. And I think it does mean that somewhere in the histories, they do mention the fifth old god, which makes it even more likely that it is the fifth old god that was supposedly devoured by the other old gods, because the Titans wouldn't have been there to see that old god. The Titans never saw that old god with their own eyes, but they did hear about the old god. You know, they fought a war. Like, that old god was already gone by the time the Titans arrived. It was only the old gods we know about. But, you know, they fought a war against the Black Empire. They would have taken prisoners. They would have interrogated. They would have heard, perhaps, at some point about this fifth old god. So, you know, like, vague memories and like mentionings of this once devoured old god. How else would we know? How else would it be a theory in this book? You know, if it wasn't somehow known about. And while the Titans were fighting the War of the Black Empire, yeah, it's likely they would have heard about it. So it's still not inconsistent, of course, because the Titans found and imprisoned 4 when they first arrived in Azeroth, but they heard about that 5th one, and so have we as a result. Also, it says when they first discovered Azeroth. So there's the potential, there's so many ways that this isn't like a mistake. There's the potential that the 5th old god was one that they discovered much later on. One that, you know, when they first arrived, they found and imprisoned 4. And, like, later on they found a 5th. There are so many ways that this isn't inconsistent. But hopefully, this does, you know, in the heads of many people, canonize the 5th old god thing, which I think we kind of knew about. You know, it was fun to have it mentioned in, sorry, I got rid of my screen there. It was fun to have it mentioned in the Word of the Conclave in the Priest Artifact Hall. He's on the other side of the planet imprisoned still. Yeah, maybe. It might be that they found him later. He was just better at hiding, right? And so they imprisoned him when they found him later, after they'd done the other ones. Oh my God, you sound like a lawyer. No, I'm just, you know, I'm just reading. I'm just like, you know, just reading the text. I think there's a general misunderstanding that Titans were here since the beginning, which isn't true, of course, but a common thought. Worse, a theologian, yeah. Could a 5th old god be hidden by the other old gods as a survival technique? Yeah, possibly. One thing we know for sure is that N'Zoth had the power to release Xal'atath from the blade of the Black Empire, which certainly suggests to me that the old gods put her there, you know, and could have released her at any point. In my opinion, that seems to be suggested by that. Maybe not. Are they kin? So I don't think she is the 5th old god. She doesn't really fit like the mold for an old god. I think most likely, like I say, she's a void entity, just like we always thought she was. She's from the literal cosmos of the void. She's like a traveler. She got herself in the scrape in the War of the Black Empire, and they trapped her in the blade. For me personally, by far the most interesting idea, and I don't think this will turn out to be the case, but I love it so much, is that she is from Azeroth, and that she is a mortal, one of the original Azeroth natives, right? Who was, as they all were, and we know this from the book, from Time Rifts, like imprisoned and sacrificed and kept as like cattle. And that she somehow, you know, marked herself out as being more than that, and somehow rose through the ranks and became like, you know, the right hand of this 5th old god. And then when the other old gods devoured this 5th old god, they trapped her inside the last remnant of that old god in the form of the dagger. I just think that's really, really cool.